Okay. So it is Sunday, just a second here, get this in focus. Sunday the 15th of October 2017, and I am protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse and various other Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy, which include, but are by no means limited to, such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, to say nothing of certain Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, and also cover-up and denial of clergy sexual abuse by top-level UUA, that is Unitarian Universalist Association leadership. People like Reverend Dr. Peter Morales, people like UUA Vice President Kathleen K. Montgomery. Oh, I forgot to mention that Reverend Dr. Peter Morales was the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association until he resigned on April Fool's Day last year. Very appropriate day for Reverend Peter Beyond Belief Morales to resign, April Fool's Day. Good timing there, Peter. Anyway, yeah, so him, Kathleen K. Montgomery, the executive vice, and I do emphasize the word vice in vice president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, because Kathleen K. Montgomery, for about 3 decades, was involved in doing the dirty work of the Unitarian Universalist Association in terms of keeping clergy sexual misconduct basically hidden from the public as much as possible, and basically doing very, very little in most cases to hold the ministers accountable. They usually got maybe a little verbal slap on the wrist and then were shunted off to some other congregation or something. Very, very few Unitarian Universalist ministers who were guilty of clergy sexual misconduct ever faced any significant accountability for it. Out of hundreds of cases of clergy sexual misconduct committed by hundreds of Unitarian Universalist ministers, only 20 or maybe 25 or so Unitarian Universalist ministers were ever defellowshipped by the Unitarian Universalist Association's Ministerial Fellowship Committee. And quite frankly, defellowshipping a minister and doing nothing else is pretty low level of accountability as far as I'm concerned. So in any case, getting back to top-level UUA leadership, well, we'll just leave it with those two for the time. And every single member of the Unitarian Universalist Association's Board of Trustees. Oh, and at least 2 UUA moderators, UUA moderator Jim Key and UUA moderator Jeannie Corder, to say nothing of interim moderator Bill Sinkford and his partner, whose name escapes me at the moment. But she's supposedly an ethicist. Well, basically just another unethical ethicist as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, her name escapes me. But anyway, all of these people are very aware of Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct issues, including such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, and they're all involved in trying to keep that hidden from the public as much as possible. In fact, UUA moderator Jim Key, in June of 2014, stood up in front of thousands of Unitarian Universalists during the 2014 General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association and brazenly lied about sexual abuse of children by Unitarian Universalist ministers in what was supposed to be a UUA board apology to victims of clergy sexual misconduct. In fact, besides brazenly lying about child sex abuse in saying there were no incidents of abuse of children or elders in my investigation in his apology, which is a brazen bald-faced lie, there was various other, how can I put it, minimizations and misleading half-truths and all that kind. It was a very mendacious and disingenuous apology that Jim Key delivered. But in my view, the biggest, baldest, bald-faced lie that he told was there were no incidents of abuse of children or elders in my investigations. Because he is clearly claiming that he personally investigated Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct, and in his investigations he found zero evidence of any sexual abuse of children by any Unitarian Universalist minister. That's what that statement means. Well, unfortunately, some Unitarian Universalist ministers have actually been charged, tried, and convicted of committing such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, and have been sentenced to jail terms for those despicable crimes. And Jim Key knew about at least some of those cases, and he could have known about others if he had bothered to fully and properly investigate clergy sexual misconduct committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers. And it's very possible that he actually did. It's possible that he did very thoroughly investigate things. It's possible he actually did know the full truth and nonetheless chose to brazenly lie about it in an apology, or so-called apology. As far as I can, there's a completely and utterly worthless apology because there's so many lies in it. It's so misleading and full of falsehoods and misleading half-truths and minimization and even outright denial of things that it's just a completely worthless apology. And I'm sure other people would agree with me if they compared the apology with the known facts about Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct in general and Unitarian Universalist sexual abuse of children in particular. So anyway, yeah, Jim Key, one of the people who was deeply involved in cover-up and denial of Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse, even though he set himself up as this perceived champion of victims of clergy sexual misconduct. And he was the guy that was going to clean up the mess and make sure everything was done properly and reform the policies and procedures of how to deal with clergy misconduct. What a joke. This guy was a fraud. Anyhow, one of the clearest indications of Jim Key being a total fraud, a liar, someone who may possibly, like his what is his motivation for all these lies and disingenuousness? Why is he doing that? Is it possible that he's more implicated in these things than we know about? I'm not saying he is, a pedophile or a rapist himself, but he is most certainly protecting and hiding, such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, even after ministers have actually been convicted of such despicable crimes. He still tries to keep that information hidden from the public and denies it ever happened. So yeah, just a pathetic liar, Jim Key, and someone who's clearly, he can't totally deny it. It's simply impossible now for Unitarian Universalists to continue to try and deny having, serious clergy sexual misconduct, but he's doing everything he can to make it appear less serious than it is, and basically hiding the worst forms of clergy sexual abuse, specifically pedophilia and rape, pretending that only a small number of Unitarian Universalist ministers are guilty of clergy sexual misconduct, when in fact literally hundreds of Unitarian Universalist ministers are clearly guilty of sexual misconduct. According to a group of interim Unitarian Universalist ministers who started counting how many Unitarian Universalist churches had been affected by clergy sexual misconduct of one kind or another at one time or another, they counted 400 churches out of a little over 1,000, and some might argue, you know, even under 1,000 Unitarian Universalist congregations where, you know, beyond any doubt, there had been at least one case of clergy sexual misconduct, and in some cases, multiple cases. And when I say multiple cases, I'm not talking about one minister engaging in multiple you know, incidents of clergy sexual misconduct. That happens all the time. No, I'm talking about multiple ministers of one church being found to have committed clergy sexual misconduct of one kind or another. You know, some churches have had 2 or even more ministers who have committed clergy sexual misconduct, you know, in their history. And then, of course, there's the, you know, serial abusers like Tony Perino. He's one of the worst, although there's also Calvin O'Dame. So yeah, Reverend Tony Perino, also known as Reverend Anthony Perino, Reverend Calvin O'Dame. These are 2 well-known cases of Unitarian Universalist ministers who essentially had multiple sexual encounters with multiple congregants while they were ministers of various Unitarian Universalist churches. So yeah, those 2 are the well-known ones. You can be sure there are others. So anyhow, yes, we have wandered and strayed a bit, and there's been one. Oh, here we go. It came back to me. The girl, the woman, the young woman who went into the church, who said I was talking to myself, not to her, because she wanted to block her ears about what I'm saying. You want to continue to wallow in willful ignorance and psychological denial, is one Amber Dawn Belshas. Amber Dawn Belshas. I'm surprised I forgot that name temporarily. So Amber Dawn Belshas, amongst other things, on one occasion, she essentially participated in the erasure of my chalk slogans that protest against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse, more specifically such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, and even more specifically, the immoral and unethical and borderline criminal attempted misuse of Canada's blasphemy law in Unitarian Universalist Association legal bullying that sought to intimidate me into removing blog posts that told the readily verifiable truth about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell and Richard Buell of First Parish Norwell, both of whom were convicted of rape of young women. You know what? I'm not even going to use the word women. Girls. They raped girls. They raped children. Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell lured teenage Tibetan refugees away from their families in India with promises of a better life in America. Obviously, he didn't just lure the teenage refugees themselves. He obviously bamboozled their parents into handing over custody of their teenage daughters to him, because he told the parents that he would take the teenagers under his wing, bring them to America, you know, make sure they got a good education, possibly even promise them U.S. citizenship or something like that. Basically, as far as I'm concerned, fraudulently, you know, told the parents that he was going to take good care of their children, and then proceeded to rape them over, in one case, a period measured in years. And they were around, good day, bonjour, thank you. It's good to have support every now and then. So, anyhow, I got a nice thumbs up from this couple. I wonder if they're Tibetan. You never know, it's possible. Might be another little synchronicity going there. Yes, so Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, you know, basically lured teenage Tibetan refugees away from India to his parishes in Massachusetts. That's the Northborough and Westborough Unitarian Universalist parishes in Massachusetts, because he had 2 parishes, and proceeded to rape them repeatedly. And finally, I believe the oldest victim, i.e. the one who was lured away first, who I could name, but I won't for now, for various reasons, she finally ran away. And, basically got away from Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell. And this was literally, as I understand it, years after the rapes first began. The rapes began, as I understand it, when she was 16. And as I understand it, she was in her early 20s when she finally was able to escape from Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, when she finally got up the courage to run away and to expose him. And that's what she did. She ran away, escaped from him, and then she told, leading members of Reverend Mac Wallace's parish. I can't remember exactly which one it was. It was either the Northborough parish or the Westborough parish. I'm leaning towards the Westborough parish. Could have been both for that matter. But in any case, what happened is Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's, to the best of my knowledge, or at least in terms of what is known, first victim in terms of being lured away from India and basically becoming a sex slave for Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell. She told, I believe, board members of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's parish. She did not go directly to the police. There was an attempt, as I understand it, by the Unitarian Universalist Association to persuade her to sign a confidentiality agreement, which essentially would have silenced her, would have essentially prevented or